An entitled mother rips open the doors on my ambulance, and it does not end well for her, by user OK_interview_1739. So, this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would do this. I'm a 30M and a paramedic. I've been in EMS for the past 8 years, and I absolutely love my job. Last night, we were dispatched to an 75-year-old female who fell at home. The patient stated that she tripped over her carpet and hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed that the home was a duplex with our patient's door on the right and her neighbor's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. The woman was awake and breathing. We started asking her the standard questions: "Are you okay? Does anything hurt? Do you remember the fall? etc." She stated that she has a pounding headache and that she remembers walking to bed and then waking up on the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We noticed that she's got a pretty good lump on the side of her head and a big bruise starting to form already. Noticing the bruise, I asked her if she was on any blood thinners. She said that she was on blood thinners for a previous stroke she had a few years ago. We urged her to let us take her to the hospital because there was a possibility that the fall could have caused a bleed in her brain, and she should go to the hospital to get some scans done. She agrees, and we begin to package her up. We applied a C-collar around her neck in case of any C-spine, neck, injuries. She denied any neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chair with tracks that we use to carry patients up and down stairs. As we were getting her out of the house, her neighbor whipped the door open and started yelling about how she couldn't sleep with all the lights and noises outside. The sound of the stair chair apparently woke her up, and she was not happy about that. My lieutenant walked over to her and apologized and said that we were dealing with a medical emergency and that we would be leaving soon enough. The Karen neighbor then noticed that our patient was her neighbor, and that's when she started yelling about something totally different. The entitled neighbor started yelling, "You can't take her to the hospital. I have errands to run tomorrow, and she needs to watch my kids." My lieutenant again reiterated that we were here for a medical emergency and that her health is more important than her errands. The entitled neighbor let out a loud huff and then slammed the door in his face. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station and that we were going to be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got in foregoing, and started giving her 4 fluids, my partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance fly open, and who do I see? The entitled neighbor, of course. Apparently, she needed a few minutes to get dressed before coming outside. I yell at her, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She yells back, "I told you that she can't go to the hospital because she has to watch my kids tomorrow." She then starts trying to pull the cot out of the ambulance with our patient on it. Luckily, she didn't know how to unlatch the cot and couldn't get her out. Our patient says, "I can't watch your kids tomorrow because I fell, and I might be having a stroke." The entitled neighbor yells back at her and says, "You're fine. You don't need to go to the hospital because you're not having a stroke." My partner then hears the commotion and goes to the back of the ambulance. He pulls her off the cot, and I slam and lock the doors. You could tell that the entitled neighbor was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls, too, when it's at night. Because of where we were, it took a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of his cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner runs back up to the driver's seat and starts heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back windows was the entitled neighbor stomping towards the officer and then her hitting the ground after being tossed, super satisfying to watch. I was talking with my patient and asked what that was all about, and she said that the entitled neighbor will just drop her 3 young kids off at her house and leave for several hours at a time with no notice. My patient had no idea that she was supposed to watch the kids at all because, again, the entitled neighbor never even gives her a heads up about these things. Like I said in the beginning, this happened last night, so I don't have any updates, but I'll post an update when I learn more. Small update, my contact at the hospital said that the patient does not have a bleed. She does, however, have a really nasty looking bruise on her face from the blood thinners. It's incredibly common. She will most likely be going home soon. There is no update on the neighbor. I probably will not hear anything back until my next shift day. My parents made me buzz my hair and are making me do all the same military stuff my brother did, by user first pi 50. My brother did drotk every year during high school, and every summer did a summer camp at a place called Marine Military Academy. He is now doing ROTC and going to be an officer. My parents basically gave me no choice. This summer they said you are doing MMA, and that it was good for your brother, he had fun, and good to learn discipline. I am not a troublemaker nor do I struggle in school. They sent me in TBH, it was a kind more fun that I thought. But the worst part was they buzz everyone's hair on the first day, and every weekend slash and right before the end. I had shoulder length hair and it was awful to have it shaved off. And my parents kept saying how good it looked short and aren't I glad got it cut? Now they are making me do drotk, which again, I actually kind of find fun, except for the military stuff. Several of my fellow JROTCers are growing their hair longer, and so I asked if I could let mine grow out a bit and my dad said if I am wearing my uniform, the hair needs to be according to the rules. He also said I was making a big deal about my hair, and my brother never made a big deal about cutting his and that it was just hair, but my parents aren't treating it like it is just hair. Entitled Mill fully expects to receive a car when, decades divorced, Phil passes away, by user J. Long history short, my Phil and Emil have been divorced for like 20 to 25 years. She left him because she thought she could do better, but he then met someone else he was very happy with and she hasn't, so there's bitterness there. A summary of Emil: she lives like the world owes her something, doesn't live within her means and also never takes responsibility for her terrible financial choices, refuses to set up a budget for herself because it's too depressing. Every few years she manages to guilt her mother or my husband's brother, and one time my Phil into giving her cash to get out of some debt and the cycle starts over. My husband has shiny spine though, we have our own family with our little girls as dependents, we can't support her too. So today was our girls' 5th birthday party, which they both attended. At one point all the kids and parents were out of the party room and it was just my husband, Emil, and Phil was telling my husband about how his final affairs are set up, what he and his brother should expect in inheritance, and since he lives locally to us and not my husband's brother, he says and you'll get my car then. To which Emil chimes in if you're going to get his car. To which my husband didn't respond. Discussing later with husband, we're on the same page that what she means is she really wants husband's sedan, not Phil's SUV, and expects us to take the SUV and for her to receive husband's current car for free at such time Phil passes away. If you're like me, you might be thinking something like why the hell is Phil discussing his financial assets and inheritance in front of Mill? Especially since it would be my husband who would be dealing with the awkwardness when we inevitably tell her, no, we're keeping the car we have, selling the Phils, putting the money in girls' college funds. But, I think Phil is just vindictive enough to posthumously stick it to her by putting her through the hope and then disappointment when she doesn't get something she'll have rationalized that she deserves, knowing full well we're not giving her a whole ass free car. Edit, clarification of husband. My mom gives my sister everything and has caused her to be a spoiled brat, by userid kilmijlfa or 8 months. I, 17, am 8 years older than my sister, 9, when I grew up I barely got anything, because we were just above the poverty line, and we needed to save money. Ever since my sister was born, I've been expected to turn into an adult overnight, clean the whole house and do all the chores. Recently my parents bought an iPad, for all of us to share. I had started uploading content on it and now it's basically another way of making money for my family, but the past few days my sister had been just ripping it out of my hands, while I was using it. And then when I tried to get it back, 5 hours later, I grabbed it and my sister started screaming hysterically for minutes straight, and started throwing things and breaking things, and my mother started to yell at me for taking it. But my sister shouldn't have been raised that way. I love my mom but sometimes she's a bit ignorant. My sister needed hard discipline but I can't give it to her or I'll get yelled at, and God knows my mom won't do anything. So all is pretty much lost. Entitled Child Trespasses, Demands Dinner and Attempts to Steal Ours, Tales from the Compound by user Keat_LTD. Hello everyone and welcome back to Tales from the Compound. I've got a shorter one for you today, featuring the return of everyone's fav, Francis, not real name, and his entitled demands. Please see original post for Francis' origin and context of these stories, e.g. what the compound is, og post. One evening, my family and I were enjoying a peaceful dinner on the back porch, when we heard the sound of our garden gate's lock being opened. We could make out the silhouette of one Francis, speed walking up to the back of our house, followed slowly by the nanny. He sped up to our table before we had the chance to say anything and inquires, "What are you eating?" My parents were somewhat in shock, and considering they were a couple of wine glasses down, found his sudden presence quite amusing. "My dad, we're just having a roast, Francis. How are you?" "Francis, I'm hungry." "My dad, well, your nanny is over there, what would you like her to make you?" Francis eyes the plate of pork sausages beside our roast chicken. "Francis, I want sausages." Francis goes to greedily snatch our plate, but my dad blocks him and luckily says, "Francis, these are pork sausages." Francis was a Muslim, as such was not able to have pork on religious grounds. Francis takes a moment to process this information before quickly adding beef sausages, then, staring at us expectantly, as if we were to go fetch him some, even going as far as to wave his hands at us after an awkward silent few seconds. "My dad, I'm sorry Francis, we don't have beef sausages." "Francis, shit." And with that, like a spectre in the night, he disappeared as quickly as he appeared, back into the night, trailed by his nanny. Once again, thanks for reading and enjoying these, and let me know if you wanna hear more. I'm still building to my fav stories, so that's gonna be a doozy when I find time to type it out. It's quite long, NGL, smiley face.